I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello! And yes, and welcome to season 33, episode 20 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy.
I'm Pooja.
Kai.
I'm serious.
That's Jason. And we have a full panel today. As you can tell, we're a little goofy.
We like each other.
We do. And we're excited to see each other. So on
That's what they're
today's...
calling it nowadays.
All right. So on today's episode, our topic today is from Gergmerg. What memorable or valuable feedback changed our view of gaming or games or a campaign or something specific? And then our emails. Brian in Milwaukee, longtime listener, first-time writer, asks about onboarding new folks into a lore-rich setting. Ask me why I picked this email for this particular episode.
Hit me.
I know. And Eric from New Jersey shares his conflict generation tool. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com, or you can post in the mailbag channel on the Discord. As you can tell, we're also taking topics. We do need emails. We still need emails, but if you just have a little thing, you're this isn't a whole email, you can also just post topics. But please also write larger, long form questions or topics or shared stories.
You can give us your dissertation.
We like a mailbag.
Yeah, we do. We like mailbag. We like mail bags. Yeah, it's fine. All right, announcements. The next game days is May 18th. You can join in game days on our Discord, happyjacks.org/Discord. Game days is basically just a community gaming day where games are run online. You can run games, join games. Last time we had 9 or 12 or something games all happen. It's always a Saturday. It's every other month. And there's a whole bunch of them posted right now, and you can already go and sign up for them. And it's been such since the day after our last one. People are very excited.
You're right.
I am.
The truth is just funny sometimes.
It is. And I say it weirdly at times also. Also, GameX at the Hilton LAX, May 24th through 27th. We will be there doing our live show on Saturday night at 8 p.m. Guess who remembered to put in all her events before Jim got mad and had to yell at me? Yeah!
Yay!
I think I gave away who it was by yelled at me at the end of that question. But
Who's me?
Who's me? There's also something else that's very exciting that's happening. What is it, Jason?
So at GameX this year, we're figuring out the logistics, but I will be doing a book signing. So
what?
My game Demigods has shipped out to the Kickstarters. Well, is at the post office at least. So I finished packing books literally midnight last night. So this morning, whatever. They are all packed up. They're ready to go to the post office tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. And that means I can sell copies at the con.
Yes.
And if you already got it in the mail or you want to buy a new copy or you just want to buy 7 copies for you and your friends, you could bring them by.
Stocking stuffers.
If you catch me at the our booth in the vendor hall, I'd be happy to sign it for you. But there will be a book signing moment that we'll sit there and do that. And sell books and so
we have it's as seen on Happy Jacks. It's actually a co-op with a bunch of different indie designers. Yeah, and it's us and Chris Gray and Stephanie Bryant and Ray from MythWorks and me, and we all share our booth space together and share watching table time so we don't all get stuck there. So it's very great, and it sort of rotates. Each con, it's a little bit of a different offering, so it's always fun to stop by and see. And our new offering this time will be Demigods.
Finally.
So exciting.
Yay!
yes, finally indeed.
So cool. And a bunch of us are going to be running games, and it's going to be great. So do the thing. Oops.
Uh-oh.
That's
You,
still live?
you saw nothing.
Yeah, we're still live.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're still live. I hit a thing. Also, so there's a new actual play that is. It started last week.
Yeah.
Technically, we're taking this week off, and then next week, next Monday, we'll be doing our session 1, and it is of a game called Starscape, which, like Demigods, was
Starscape?
born in the Happy Jacks studio and ish, kind of like in the community. So yes, it will be kickstarting in June. So if you'd like to follow the page and get notified when the Kickstarter goes live in June, you can go to goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter, and then you can also watch the actual play and see how the game goes. And then
No problems will occur.
none. It'll be great. It'll be perfect. It'll be fine. I mean, there'll be lots of drama, but hopefully none of it with the actual mechanics of the game.
Good. I thought the zero session went very well.
It went well, yeah. And I was like, okay, we will not use Decima. I want it.
I did feel without,
Yeah.
I specifically was like, okay, we're gonna use like
but the bones of the system
Yeah.
are good enough
they're there.
that there's enough Kimmyism in it that there's enough Decima there.
There's a lot in there.
I'm excited to see how the help mechanic boiled out. Like
Yeah.
that's
Oh yeah, same.
I mean, yeah, that one didn't really change because it was so good anyway.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's very good. But yeah, check that out. That will be on Monday nights at 7 p.m. starting next week, the first Monday of May. And yeah, goldenlassogames.com/Kickstarter for the thing. It'll be so cool.
Yay, Kimmy.
Yay.
Starscape's really good. You should brag. It's good.
We'll see.
I mean, I
Agreed.
brag for you, so it's
Yeah, I'm going to sit here and brag for you then. I
Yeah.
really like it.
it's outstanding.
It's so much fun.
Okay.
It's a system encouraging me to make problems.
I know. It does.
Which is-
a lot. A lot. It's very
so
good.
delicious.
Because you wouldn't otherwise.
No.
I don't make problems.
All right. Our indie designer of the month for April is Nerdburger Games. That's Craig Campbell, who was on the show with us last week. Him. This week, we're going to talk about a game speaking of Kickstarter, I backed this game on Kickstarter. Capers. It's a superpowered game of gangsters in the Roaring '20s that uses cards instead of dice for the mechanic. And it does it very elegantly. Like, I'm not, as much as I love, like, cards because I made Decima, like, I don't always love cards as a randomizer in an actual like RPG where you're interacting in a different way than like for the Queen or Decima or things like that. But Capers does it in a very elegant way that I really like.
Is it like normal deck of cards?
Or
Or is it a card-based game?
No, you can buy the
Sure,
there's
yeah.
like there's like options.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. So you can I always suggest you buy the
Oh yeah, of course. You want to buy the thing.
Support
if
Craig.
it's a card-based game,
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah. So the pitch is, it's the Roaring *20s, Prohibition era in the United States. Alcohol is illegal. I can't do it as well.
I have heard
Alcohol
your
is
20s.
illegal.
Like, you absolutely can.
Okay, here I can do that.
Come on, Kimmy.
All right, here, listen.
Give me that Mid-Atlantic.
It's the 1920s prohibition in the United States. Alcohol is illegal. Organized crimes are at an unprecedented rate as gangsters get rich selling hooch in the thirsty populace. Law enforcement, I haven't done this in a really long time, struggles to keep up in an understaffed and underfunded Bureau of Prohibition.
Absolutely.
Wow, it's just bowels.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. I can't do the announcer voice, but I can sort of do Betty Boop. I don't know.
I guess that's...
Will you use your abilities to build a criminal empire as a superpowered gangster, or will you focus your powers to serve the law and bring these criminals to justice? This is an all-in-one game book with rules for players and GM, character creation, full rules, GM guidelines, setting information, and several backdrop cities, NPCs, story ideas, and more. And you can get it for $24.99 on DriveThruRPG.
Cool.
All right.
Oh.
Yes. Topic from Gergmerd. What, and this is like a spin-off from a previous episode where we talked about eliciting feedback from players using Stars and Wishes, Thorns and Roses, and Buds. There's a lot of Bud talk.
A sparkle.
Yeah. What are some memorable and or valuable feedback that you've gotten that changed the way you approached a particular game, campaign, or games in general?
I'm going to start with the thing I was literally just telling you earlier today, Kimmy.
What?
So this is not necessarily about game systems per se, but it's one of those things where you can never take for granted your point of view on a safety tool.
Mm-hmm.
We love safety tools, everyone.
We do.
And specifically the stoplight system, I had truly never considered that there would be a huge section of the population that can't use it. I'm a big fan of the stoplight system personally at my tables. One of the very first things I did when I started running tables was I bought a like crap load of cards and stuff to give to people. And I'm currently starting a game with someone who's like, I really like the stoplight system too, but I can't use it because the two cards you're showing me are the same color. Because he is red-green colorblind.
Yeah.
Right.
And that really, like this week, that has been my big brain opener of like, that is a very valuable piece of feedback of, you know, we're always like, I think everyone is always learning and growing when they experience new people's interaction with the world. And that one really just was like, wow, I forget that because I'm used to like in video game design where they're like, oh, we got to highlight characters in unique colors that can be changed. I love this development for color blindness in video games of like being able to change the color settings to highlight different characters and stuff like that in different colors. Fantastic. Had not thought about it for safety tools of all things.
Yeah. No, that's a huge one.
I remember like I had a GM who was using the stoplight system, and in addition to red, yellow, green, they were in different shapes.
Yeah, that's what Kimmy was
Okay.
saying.
Yep. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, having some sort of visual component. I had to get that note for, and like I told you earlier today, for Decima.
Yeah.
Because originally the design was just colored backs. And then someone's like, hey, I really want to play this game. I can't really play this game right now. I was like, oh. So that's where the sun, star, and moon like cards was born.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
I was really glad I got that feedback before I did like printing.
Yeah. And like I know some people, especially like people who do streaming, they'll like print cards that say like red on it as well. But even then, I know with specifically people who have a like disability of differentiating colors can also lose the print in it because their eye can't differentiate the thing around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my mind was blown. And like I bought these amazing Texas Hold'em like deck cutters. They're plastic.
yeah.
If you see me set up my stuff, I always have a set on me.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, do I have to write the word on the card? Do I have to cut my cards? My brain is expanding every second that I think about it.
Maybe like stickers.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
My teacher brain's like, stickers.
Yeah.
Put stickers on it.
It's also a nice thing because, like, the thing about stickers is, like, if you have that surrounding area of, like, black or white, you reduce the risk of, like, losing the lettering in the legibility of the lettering in the card itself, which I've had a problem with. And, like, I don't have color blindness, but what I can find is that, like, visual noise can make me lose letters.
If you put something in front of like a bright red, especially if it's black, no one's gonna see that. Yeah. So yeah, visual design equally as important in game design.
100%.
Yeah.
I had a slightly
go.
like different thought about like when I first read the prompt, the first thing that came to mind was designing games, and the thing that really like blew my hair back, and just let all the creativity flow. I had been trying to gamer proof my game, right? And D&D has to, right? Because they have competitive play or what people are actively trying to break the game to get away with whatever they can because they're not playing in good faith and they're not playing in the spirit of the table.
They're wargaming, not role-playing.
Right. And the people who made D&D felt like they had to design around that. And so to my mind, I describe D&D as it's designed in the culture of no, right? Here's a long list of what you can't do and why. And so I was struggling with but if somebody does this and this and this, then that's going to break demigods. And what do I do with that? And but what I was describing was not a normal thing your character would do. It's like yes, you could do that, but why? What is the story there? What's behind it? And it might have been Chris Gray, but somebody in particular had this perspective you do not have to design for the bad faith player. They are going to do what they're going to do regardless of what you write.
Yeah.
So make the game you want to make with the idea that it'll be played as intended or not, but that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Right? And that was just a shocking thing that came to mind. And I think it carries over to like when you're setting up a campaign, right? And you have some story beats and some ideas that you want to do, you do not have to player proof your campaign.
Nope.
Yeah.
They are going to get into it. They're going to mix it up. They're going to mess stuff up, but you can't really mess it up if it can go either way. You know, like it's if they're playing in good faith, the outcome is acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, and that is, you know, when we say in a really loose game, we're like, oh well, yeah, it's a puzzle box. What's it do? I don't know. Let's decide together. You open it up. A dragon comes out of it. I'm like, come on, man. That doesn't.
Now you're in combat. Roll initiative.
Right, like that doesn't make sense. Like it's a little box like this, and suddenly there's a dragon the size of a house.
It's you know.
Sure.
You know what
Yeah.
fits in a puzzle box is a pin.
Yeah,
Hey, okay.
but you get to assume that your players or the people playing your game down the road will engage with it in good faith, and if they don't, that's their
That's
problem.
a them problem.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna Kool-Aid Man into their house and tell them they're doing it wrong. It's not my problem.
You're not the fun police.
Yeah, I'm the unfun police.
That's like the best domino advice ever because
Yeah.
like a lot of what I learned about game design, I learned from Jason and being part of like Demigod's development.
Oh wow.
Like 100%. Like I don't think I ever would have thought I could make a game if I hadn't like watched you create demigods.
Oh yeah, if I could do it, anybody could.
No,
do it.
no, 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 no,
No,
no.
no, I'm sorry. I know you weren't saying that was a bad faith
no,
read.
it's okay. That's okay. No,
it
no,
just popped in my head.
Yeah,
as a
but
joke.
it was inspiring and like seeing like where it started and how you like ran it, like different campaigns and took feedback and stuff. But like I remember when you like shared that with me, that knowledge, like that wisdom of, well, I'm not gonna, because at first we kind of were trying to like design for bad faith.
Yeah.
And we would like talk for hours about different moves and how to like people proof them. And then like you just had like this wisdom moment. I don't even remember what it was. You just like came into, it was like a different day and you're like, no, fuck the asshole. Like was like, and I remember just like, yeah, you're 100% right. Like they're not going to do it right anyway. If they're trying to break it, then who fucking cares?
Yeah.
And like, 100%. I don't think if I hadn't like gotten that secondhand from whoever like Chris Gray or whoever gave it to you, like design of Starscape would be totally different because you can't design social interaction moves between actual players and you can't people proof them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like a core part of the design couldn't even exist if that wisdom hadn't been passed down.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it is true whether you're designing a game, right, like you were saying, writing a campaign or playing at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't people proof how you're playing a character to make everyone else like play with them correctly or not upset, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, using safety tools, don't make a character that's an asshole.
Right.
But you can't be like, okay, if I
Not a fun asshole.
yeah. Yeah, with, you can play an asshole with permission and safety tools
Yeah.
at the table.
Yeah. There's a way to do
Yeah.
it, but
But you can't, but like, you can't sit there and be like, okay, if I have this plan and okay, I know so-and-so like likes to be the star of the table. So if I'm quiet about how I play my character, like you can't people proof playing in good faith.
Yeah. You also can't game design around table dynamics.
right.
That's really one of the things that I'm like thinking about really hard is like you were talking about the rule of no, and I'm thinking about like if a game design is like a bowling lane, right? You can just have the gutters, and that's the D&D version of like you can either do it or you can fall in the gutter and you have no chance of succeeding whatsoever. It's just no.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, let's put the bumpers on. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy the story. Let's keep going down, and maybe something will happen in the end. Maybe it won't, but the whole journey will still happen.
Right.
And I'm thinking about like the joy of saying like it doesn't. This game design, or even like thinking about actual play and storytelling in that way, it's like it's okay to say that's not the audience for this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, to use myself as an example again, the next thing I'm working on is requires the players to partner up, right? So it requires an even number of players at the table. And I know somebody's going to ask me like, well, I want to make the character who doesn't have a partner anymore. Like, cool, play any other game.
Literally any other game.
Like, I'm doing a weird thing here, and not everyone's going to like it, and it's not going to be for every table at every moment.
Yeah.
But this one is for an even number of players because you wear your friend into battle.
Yeah.
And
Also, duet games should be a thing that people embrace, and that should be it. And if someone wants to ask the question, they can figure out their table whether or not they want to break the rules.
Yeah.
That's not on you to design.
right.
Yeah. It's like if you want to go on that, that's your homebrew.
Yeah.
Congratulations, go homebrew the game.
Yeah.
I guess like coming off of that a little bit, I don't talk about my history of gaming very much, but I started gaming in D&D like 3 to 3.5. It was a very specific mindset. I was at a very specific table with a bunch of college-aged people of a certain demographic. And I was
think I
taught
can
a
picture
lot.
it.
I think I've been at this table, actually.
I was taught a lot about like the importance of min-maxing your character
Uh-huh.
to the exclusion of all else.
Sure.
And I remember like, and this is still pretty early on, like, so I go through like 4 or 5 years of this, and then I come into like just a different table, playing Pathfinder, and that table was all about the bumpers.
Sure.
Yeah.
To steal your analogy,
That's
it's like, you know what? Whatever we are doing, it is going to be the most nonsensical thing. Like, it was just whatever we wanted, and then we, like, found the things that Pathfinder let us do. Because at the time, Pathfinder was a lot, like, more open to that kind of thing. Like,
Especially if you're talking about in contrast to 3.5.
seriously.
I-
So, like, if we could just make the weirdest characters that we wanted, and we did, and we told a fun story, and also, like, you know, like, dungeon crawled our way through whatever, but like, you know, my friend who played an orc named Smash now,
Yeah.
and he would carry my like tiny witch character on his shoulders
Amazing.
I love
around
Smash now.
until my character got their own dragon.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Because like I'm multi-classed into whatever, but like it was the idea that within the bounds of the table, like obviously not one of us doing like going off on this adventure and like everybody else playing like kind of a standard game, but that it didn't matter. It didn't matter about like min-maxing and stats and all the minutia of whatever. If we were all having a good time, that like we just could all have a good time together.
Yeah.
Really, probably I would say like is the thing that kept me gaming all the rest of these years.
It's interesting because in my mind, Pathfinder and D&D are sort of equal on crunch
Yes.
level.
Agree.
And so I'm putting this out there because I want to get your take on it. Like my impression, like when I sit down and play D&D, I do optimize numbers wise because I find it so punishing to be short on numbers. And then that's less fun when I'm playing with a group of people who are going to fight on grids and do that. If I'm the only one who's not doing it, it feels bad. But I'm wondering about your experience with that.
I mean, when I was playing 3.5, I was playing a ranger.
Oh, God.
I
didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't
God
know.
thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
That was my...
Um,
yeah.
But so I had gone through that set of like I was literally getting hand-me-down gear from my table mates.
Aw.
Like
It's almost sweet. Almost.
I was the younger child. But moving into the game, like one of the big things was a buy-in from the table. That we had all agreed that we wanted it to be fun. We wanted it to be kind of like
A session hero.
This is the table conversation
It's
thing.
it's the table conversation thing.
Yep.
So like it was just a buy-in from everyone, including the GM, who was having a ton of fun with it. None of us were punished for doing our ridiculous things, in part because we had all bought into the ridiculous thing,
Yeah.
and in part because we weirdly had a really good set of table balance.
I love that.
We were each really, really good at something.
Okay.
So, whereas, like, yeah, I mean, Smash now had an intelligence of,
Oh.
like very low.
Oh, no.
But it was one of those things that, like, it didn't matter because we had other characters to balance it out, and we all had, and it also helped a lot with Table Spotlight. Because some of us were really good at one thing, another thing, we weren't all vying for attention all the time because
Yeah.
I think this goes into game design, like kind of bringing it all the way back to like one of the things that I find that especially a lot of D20 systems want to punish you for failing.
Yeah.
And like it's so funny because I started gaming in that same era that you were talking about of 3.5 and when White Wolf was not World of Darkness yet, that kind of stuff, and it was dismal. And I quit and I came back as a GM in 5e. And I made it my mission to just have fun. And as a GM, I roll the stinkiest garbage you've ever seen in your entire life until it's really inconvenient for me to succeed, and then I succeed. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's why I like things like PBTA, where it's like, yeah, I maybe roll, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like the encouragement to fail as a GM in 5e became very like exciting to me. And then I took it as a player when I started playing as a player. I was like, oh, I like failing still. But it's in the game design and in the culture, let's be frank.
Yeah.
But failing is something that I think a lot of people, when they design a game system like 5e where they call it a critical failure, and they want you to like lose your gear and all that stuff over, it's like, it's one thing for it to be a choice and a buy-in, again, going back to the table conversation, but also like a buy-in from yourself. Because everyone might say like, oh yeah, I'm okay with failing because you're playing a tabletop game and dice do that. But it's another thing to like, is it fun for you?
Yeah.
Is it fun to lose that stuff? And it's one of the things that I like about more narrative-driven systems, like in, PBTA, which I know Kimmy loves so dearly.
I'm the only one at the table who does, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
You don't have a
Then I don't know
PBTA
what
game
you're
sitting on
talking
this table right here.
I just want to add something to
Yeah,
that real
go,
quick,
go,
just
go.
because you were talking about how you roll as the GM. I like that I don't roll as the GM in PBTA because I roll like supernova hot as the GM.
It's so upsetting to roll well as a GM.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
Like literally, like we're playing D10s and wild talents, and I just have 5 10s out of 10
And
dice.
2 wiggle
like,
dice.
Yeah.
and like, so I'm like didn't want. I'm like
what
showing
am I supposed to
on
do
the
with this?
side, like, I'm sorry, I'm not fudging the dice. I would, but like, this is bad and wrong.
In one of the very first combats in a new campaign with someone that is one of the people who got me back into tabletop, I almost killed her PC. And I was just like, 2 natural 20s in a row in combat is just mean.
Yeah.
We basically had the equivalent of like a holiday episode. And a TPK.
Yeah.
Oh.
No.
It was like the second half of Pinnacles. Like almost didn't happen thanks to Jason's incredibly
I would love to.
Hey, stop it.
I would love to. That's why I don't roll dice.
Go touch Clara's dice for 5 seconds.
I had.
Give me a set of dice.
I will
and
make
it
her
never
roll.
rolls well.
I'll make her roll well. This is what
I
happens to
hate
my
this,
dice.
actually.
Like there was a D&D scenario where I had these 4 spiders. Fortunately, they were just shooting their webs. I was like, okay, everybody, they're all 4 of them are going to shoot their webs
You're
at different
stuck.
people.
You're stuck.
20, 20, 19, 18.
Oof. I hate this for you.
At
I
least
really-
it didn't do double damage, but I was like,
Yeah.
I'm glad that was the web shooter. Like, what?
Yeah.
And like I love it's so funny because everyone always talks about like hating to fail as a player, but I think it's very funny that people don't talk about how GMs don't want to succeed because it feels, it's like, hey dice, why are you doing this to me? It's like,
Yeah.
I know it's your job, but it's also my job to then tell people this.
Yeah, I want a middle road of dice and like
like why must you? I'm the messenger here.
Right. which is what like getting a 6 minus in PBTA is fun because as a GM I could say like, oh yeah, don't worry, you got the thing,
Yeah.
but
you won't like it in 5 seconds.
yeah, and then this happens,
Yeah.
like and then that's not on me. I'm just like making the next thing happen within a given sandbox of like what I can do in that
I love a
situation.
mixed success
Yeah.
or a like passable failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With every fiber of my being.
Right.
Good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I love Sarah has jammed a couple of like D&D one-shots for us. And they are so good at that kind of like
Yeah.
injecting that feeling into D&D
Mhm.
of like, well, you failed.
Mm-hmm.
But
But like,
Yeah.
let's talk about this failure,
What does that
shall
look
we?
like?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it really opens up my mind to like, because let's be real, like despite having some interesting and good experiences with D&D since 5e came out and all of that, like I still kind of like associate D&D with my 3.5 roots
Yep.
Same.
as a ranger.
You know what? I love a ranger. I
So
gotta
do
stand, I stand up for the Rangers. I love a ranger.
I love what Ranger wanted to be.
Listen, Ranger doesn't know what she wants to be,
I know.
but I love her nonetheless.
My introduction to D&D in 3.5 was playing a druid. I was like,
Oh.
oh, guys, I just win at everything. Like, what's the problem here?
Listen,
Like,
in 5e, they're still broken.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But it was that idea that like coming in and narratively failing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Narratively failing being so much more interesting than just mechanically failing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a huge like not necessarily a piece of feedback, but an experience that changed the way I thought about gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about narrative ownership, because that's kind of what it sounds like. One of the big things is like, one of the things I really like about systems like PBTA is like, it isn't about what the GM decides, but it's also, there's something very wonderful. So systems like 10 Candles, where you're actually wrestling for narration rights.
Yeah.
And being able to own even your own demise. I find that systems like that make players make the most just messed up choices on this earth. And I almost like, now I'm having big brain about like, I have a GM that I play with regularly that's like, you narrate your own critical failures.
Oh yeah.
Even in, because we play a lot of 5e, and they're like, no, what happens? It's like, something really bad is about to happen.
Players always come up with so much worse stuff than you would ever
Yeah.
say as a GM.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I love it.
stuff that like is impactful on an emotional as well as like mechanical level.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that so much. I love doing that to myself, which I think, wow, I just put myself out there on the internet.
But
It's fine.
I will add though, if you are going to ask your players for like what is the bad thing that happens, do try to have that conversation ahead of time. I had a little feedback from somebody at one point who was like, look, I love playing this game, but I like cannot come with something. Like, can you just decide the bad thing? Like after the game, they were like, I can't. That's too much pressure, right? Like,
And some people,
yeah, like make sure everyone's on board for that, because some people do want the GM to like step in and like
Yeah.
do some lifting there, and that's great. But make sure you're talking to your players about that.
Or just phrase it as a question.
Yeah.
Do you want to narrate what happens? And then they can be like, yes. The terrible thing, the
Yeah.
most terrible thing you could possibly think of that you would never
Yeah.
do as a GM.
Yeah.
Or no, tell me what happens.
Yeah.
or you could say like, this is the thing that happens. What does that look like?
Yeah.
I've had to scale back players' answers.
Yeah.
Like,
That
hey,
is too harsh, actually. I'm gonna do half of what you just said.
What I like is like the idea that you are able to narrate something and then the GM translates it into the game mechanics. I enjoy doing that both as a player and as a GM.
Yeah,
where
yeah,
it's like
same.
you take that and you're like, okay, you didn't have to think about like you took that narrative and it's such a beautiful thing, and it's like, okay, well, this is what this means for your sheet. You never have to think about that. Like, I'll think about that for you, or the GM will think about that for you, and you can just let this thing stand as a
Yep.
as a little black lotus.
I actually, it was pointed out to me yesterday, I think I actually like failing in tabletop games more than I like succeeding, which is really weird.
It's fun.
In the right table,
Yes.
right, where you're
Yeah.
not punished for it, it's more fun. Like,
But
it's
also,
exciting.
I'm that person that will stand up to people that are like, boo. I'm like, what? You think I came here to win? You're going to
Yeah.
win at tabletop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
No.
Exactly.
So my feedback actually I got from two different sources, not exactly the same week, but like in the same 2-week span. I was GMing. It was one of my first times GMing at a convention, because actually for the first most of the games I ran for a number of years were at conventions. Were at the Strategicon conventions, because that's how I decided to learn to GM with strangers at a convention. That seems like a great idea. Actually, it was. I learned a lot very quickly. And then I got the same feedback actually from my boss at work supervising me as a teacher. And it was, it was just kind of like this,
Facilitation is facilitation.
yeah, the in stereo was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And And it was, I think I got it from my boss first, and then I got it from a player who I don't think I ever saw again at my table, but it was basically like give the room time to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, and my boss knew I came from like a performance background a little bit, like, oh, you were a theater kid, because
Work?
yeah, what?
Work?
Didn't know anything obviously about, Happy Jacks or jamming or anything, but it was like, you feel the need to fill space, you feel the need to fill time. So like you give your class thinking time, but then you talk through the thinking time, which is more interesting.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's
I
good
think
you're
it's
giving
fun.
them thinking time. I was a new teacher. It was like my second year teaching or something,
yeah,
third
yeah,
year
yeah.
teaching. So I was like stand-up comedian mode. Like I would like make little jokes and stuff and like chat with some
And
of
they're
them.
like trying to learn how
Yeah.
to.
I know. So she was like, your lessons are amazing, but when you give thinking time, you have to be quiet too. It's like,
Wow.
yeah.
This is vicious and also a targeted attack
Yep.
on me.
I'm like, I'm
And,
sitting right here.
Yeah.
You could just at me next time.
And then I got the same feedback. Like literally, it was like a week later or something. When I was at TeacherCon, I don't remember which one of the year it was. But I had a player at the table and was like, "Oh, I really enjoyed the game. It was really great." There was a couple times where it was a little distracting when we were like trying to like figure things out, like on our sheet. I forget how exactly he phrased it, but like, where you just, it was very entertaining. You're very funny. But like, just kind of let things. He didn't phrase it the exact same way, but almost like just give us a little bit of thinking time or breathing time. I forget exactly. It was similar enough. I was like, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And so that really resonated with me. And I think as I've aged and as I've, become more wise, and I think anyone who watched any of the One Ring campaign,
Yeah.
like there's just like silence.
But you also vamp right at the right time.
Yeah,
I was literally just sitting here thinking about specifically that game and the like long pause, and then Kimmy starts vamping.
Yeah, I don't know. I've gotten a feel for it. I think also with teaching, I get a lot of practice.
Yeah.
But there's like enough time where you like give them like time to think about it. You could like percolate or marinate in whatever's happening just enough, and then you kind of like, okay, bring them back from it. I don't know, but I think that was like the most valuable feedback I've ever got for teaching and for GMing.
Mm.
And
love
it's
that.
just, it's completely changed the vibe of my GMing. It's completely changed the stress level of my GMing, because I'm just like riding. I'm like cruising through it. Like
Vibe
now,
vibes.
yeah, it's vibes, and no longer like me. Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, is everybody doing the thing? I'm micromanaging every moment of the thing. Yeah. So that's mine.
I want to well, I don't know, however many more thoughts, but like another thing that occurs to me, particularly during the design phase, but I've incorporated it into other components of my life too, where I used to be very like push and pull, like every opinion mattered equally, and I needed to like factor everything somebody said into either my teaching reviews or the feedback for a game or running a campaign or whatever. And one of the key moments I knew my game was done was when I got some feedback and I went, no, I don't think that works. I actually like my thing better, right? And that moment was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's not me being an asshole. That's like, oh, this is my voice. Like,
Yeah.
here's what I'm here to do. And to stand up for that part as well, to say like, yeah, you know what? I don't like telling you what happens to my character. Can you please narrate it? That's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
Advocate for the thing that you know is a good fit for you.
Yep.
And that was a revelation to me.
It's awesome.
I love that.
All right, I am gonna wrap us up
Wait,
because we
but
do
probably
have
should get to
emails.
some-
Yeah. Emails.
Mailbags.
Emails.
Emails.
I can talk about this all day.
Yeah, 100%. All right, mailbag number 1. Who wants to read it?
Oh.
You want to go?
Well, it's the short one.
Go.
Picks the shortest email.
Go.
There's only 2.
Okay. Long time, first time. I was wondering if you could talk some about how you bring players along to a setting where the lore is deep, but they don't have the same background.
Kimmy, you start.
Some examples might be a deep homebrew or a setting like Rifts, which has 50 plus splats for setting.
Yeah.
I don't want to assign reading to the class,
Correct.
but I also would like them to understand the flavor and tone that is established by the existing material. Brian in Milwaukee.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm
you,
sorry
Brian.
to call them out, but this person is over 35 years old.
The double space after
yeah.
the period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's all right.
I know.
You just came for me.
Also, riffs is kind of a giveaway.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was about
Yeah.
to say. Rips is also.
You know what, Brian? Thank you.
We appreciate
Yes.
you.
I am also in my mid-30s.
I'm older than that.
No,
But yeah,
Kimmy, we
I'm in-
look younger. It's fine.
I'm in my mid something.
I was on a podcast guesting the other day, and they were just like, I forget, we were talking about it, and they were like, oh yeah, well most of us are millennials except for Kimmy. I was like, do you think I'm like thinking in my head, do they think I'm like a boomer or something? And they're like, oh yeah, you're like 10 years younger than us. I was like, I actually was like the oldest person there. I'm like, yeah, it's just my my good lingo, and like I project young, and also the Zoom filter probably, but you know.
Sure.
Shh, we don't talk about the Zoom filter.
No.
I will say.
The question, though, I'm very curious to hear, because like I know that there was specifically, and not just for that, but specifically for Unsung Tales and the One Ring. Like I know you had a lot of really interesting thoughts about bringing people into what is possibly one of the most daunting giant lore dumps humanly possible.
Yeah.
With such a spectrum of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and I've been kind of holding off for this email for a while, or this topic for a while. It didn't get posted that long ago, but I was like, kind of like looking, I was like, oh, this week's perfect for this. Because also Jason's run tons of Shadowrun.
Yeah, actually, I have two notes of things that I want to bring up.
I've been on a big tear about this, but
Yeah. And Pooja, you've run a whole bunch of stuff with home run and also things built into your like XCOM, yeah. And then like your personal knowledge of different cultures, which is very similar as well. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so many different ways. I think the first way, and we've talked about this on the show before, do not, like you said, do not assign homework.
you're right.
Don't do that. One of the things I liked doing is we've talked about it where you like have the person be like the new person, the person who as a character, their character wouldn't know. Like in ours, it was like the Hobbit who like had never been anywhere but the Shire, and it's like okay, and that's very much like the trick that Tolkien himself uses. Okay, well, these are the hobbits discovering the rest of Middle Earth. So you as a reader are discovering Middle Earth with these hobbits.
You'll notice I played an elf for the opposite reason.
So thankful for
Or are
that.
you familiar with Lord of the Rings?
What?
Not at all. Don't at all have an elvish tattoo.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
And could pass a fluency test, I assume.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those amazing things that, like, Tolkien was kind of amazing at, was using the hobbits as the audience surrogate.
Yeah.
And you don't think about it until you're older or whatever, but when I was first reading those books, like, I was in 5th grade. I didn't know anything about audience surrogates. What am I supposed to say? But you're reading it and you're, like, discovering this whole world. And they have the same sense of wonder that you do as, like, or as I did as a child. And you're like, holy shit. But yes, also, what about Second Breakfast?
Yeah.
And Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about Tom? Anyways.
Oh my gosh.
So I want to add a little bit to this. One of the things I have experienced, like, okay, Lord of the Rings, love it. There are some movies you could watch now. They're like, okay, that's a 6-hour homework assignment.
It's nice that you think that it's 6 hours.
For one
13.
movie. One movie.
Oh yeah.
13 hours.
13 hours.
Yeah. But,
I mean,
but
with
like,
the director's cuts.
The real ones.
Yeah.
okay, but there is stuff you could look up online to get a like speed run version of some information about Lord of the Rings, right? Like before last month when I ran a Fallout campaign
Oh my, literally what I'm thinking in my brain right now.
to bring my players up. I had 2 players who had like one player had played every game like me. One player had played like a game and enjoyed it, and then I had 2 other players. Was one of them you who had played no Fallout, or you had
No,
played
I had
some?
played Fallout.
Vault
Okay.
color.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't the hardcore. I was like the middle one.
Yeah, you were the
Who'd,
middle
like
one.
I
Okay.
played a couple of them and like not finished another one. Yeah.
And then
Who finishes games?
Me.
Yeah,
I've finished
also-
every Fallout game.
also me.
Every Mass Effect game. I have a problem.
Thank you.
I'm a
Yeah, but-
completionist.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm
but
with you at this table.
I
Start all of them.
approach that I use in that situation, or to use Shadowrun, I know as an example too, where there is no media touchstone, right? There's nothing to point people at,
Just
like
a deep well that's
Right.
actually an ocean.
right, right. Where I could say, okay, it's like Blade Runner if there were dragons and elves and shit, and that's just like, what? That's nothing. Like, there's no.
You just said words.
Yeah, that's absolutely nothing. Like, what if a dragon owned an oil company? Like, they kind of do. But, like, it's having to boil it down to. So, first of all, with Shadowrun, I said, okay, we're actually going to go absolutely street level. We're going to get these characters who live in a little part of, like, the worst part of burned out, blown out Seattle. And your whole world is these 6 blocks. Right? All you have to know is what you can see on TV and the shittiness of your day-to-day life, and start with that. And so for the people who didn't know anything about Shadowrun, that was accessible. And to take Fallout, not jumping into everything I know about every vault that's ever been created.
Same. Yes.
But to say, our vault is this weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the weird thing that our vault does.
Right. And it's built into a mountain. And here's what a super mutant is. Here's what a ghoul is. End of homework.
Yeah. Also, freaked out when the first episode. This is not really a spoiler. You see it in the first 5 seconds of the show. But the new Fallout takes place in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was like,
well, the OG games are set in LA.
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I,
I was trying to skirt us around the boneyard and Shady Sands and all. Oh, they blew it up. Okay.
Yeah, okay. One of the things that I always think about, because my foray into coming back to tabletop was what is now a 500-page world document.
okay.
I like world building. I love a world building.
What?
Weird, I know. It's so strange. I don't love world building in other media. It's fine. But one of the things that, as a player and as a GM, one of the things that I've always kind of taken to heart is challenge by choice. And so, like, I'm actually setting up a Fallout game right now. And one of my encouragements to the GM was to say, you can tell players they can play anything they want, but with the knowledge that if they want to play, like what I'm playing, a Mr. Handy, you better know some stuff, or you better do your homework, or want to read things that I give you.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that, like, you have to read them or it won't be fun. It's one of those, like, make it narratively satisfying that you don't know things if you're not interested in doing that, or make it relevant that you do know these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why when I was building Ireland, I originally entered the 0 session with the intention of playing a Dunedain.
Yeah.
And the more I sat with it, I had this idea in the back of my head of, like, I know way too much about this world. It would be very satisfying for me as a player at this table with all these people who have such a variation of experience to say, I could really let it rip if I play an elf. But it wouldn't discount someone who, say, has 0 experience with Middle Earth and say, like, but I really want to play an elf. It's like, okay, well, are you up for me giving you just, like, a quick lore dump of just, like, here's a 5-page document. And you can reference it, you can read it once, and that's fine. And so it's not like giving them homework and saying, do you want homework?
Yeah.
Because as a player, I'm always the person that's like, oh, you're inviting me to your homebrew setting? Can I read your entire lore document?
Yeah.
Because that's me. And I have players at my tables that want to read my 6-page player intro to the world, and then I let them break it. It's fine. But I think it's both. Like, let them play the Vault Dweller. Say, like, it's okay to know nothing, and here's the setting for it, and why, you'll get more information as you go. Like, the show, I think, brilliantly encapsulates the, so, not spoilers, promise. But the show, the first episode, narratively hits the beats of every intro level of the most recent games, like beat for beat, because those game levels are meant to teach you how to operate in the world, how to use the game, and what the world is about. And the show is like, hey, that really worked. We're going to do exactly that. And that's the entire plot of the first episode.
Yeah. So good.
And so I always say it's the Alice down the rabbit hole method of like, welcome to the world. It's weird and strange, and you don't know what's going on, and that's okay.
Yeah. And it's always great, like what you did in One Ring, Unsung Tales. It was great because you could, if you have a player who knows so much, like it made perfect sense that, like, like the Hobbit would turn to you and ask you a question as like the lore master elf. And so like there were points where I could explain things, but it happened so just like organically in game and like made the story deeper. And we had like Dave and Jay especially like would like ask questions and like they really wanted to know, but they asked like
so sweet.
in character because their characters wanted to know too, and it was so much fun. And then I think the cool thing about that too is like as we went, people learned more and more about it. So we started losing, just like in the books or just like in, you know, when you play the intro level to the games, and as you go through the game, you stop being that shiny new hobbit. Like you start like leveling up or whatever. Another thing though that I suggest, because Dave did this, is he decided to become an expert on like dwarves and dwarves specifically. So it's like he didn't have to know everything about Middle Earth. He was playing a dwarf. So he was going to learn all he could about dwarves. So he would like deep dive.
cool.
It was so cool. And
so
he would like he would like message me about like Silmarillion stuff in the middle of the day. I was like, I thought I couldn't love you anymore, Dave. I love you so much. And now
Dave is a gift.
And they rewarded him with
Truly.
an entire book about it.
yeah, they did. It was so good. So if people are interested and they want to learn more, rather than like overwhelming them with like, here's the entire history of Middle Earth, or here's everything you need to know. Okay, there's a whole bunch of shit to know about Rifts. As someone who jumped into that game, as someone who knew almost nothing when Dave ran Savage Rifts like years and years and years ago, I realize now like people still sometimes comment on the YouTube video like, wow, she's not really acting like a cyber knight. Yeah, I know. Because
You know
I didn't-
now.
Yeah, because I didn't do the research. But what I would do now is like I don't have to know everything about fucking wild rifts, which I do know more now.
Yeah.
But like I need to learn more about like how to be a good cyber knight. And having them just like silo, like this is what you would know everything about. You'd be vaguely aware of dwarf or of elves as a dwarf.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Well, and Dave did something similar for the Blade Runner game. Talk about a universe with deep lore. It
Yeah.
was just one of those, like, again, I love lore, so I keep on playing in all these IP-related shows, and it's like, oh, it's partly because I love this thing. But it was interesting because during our Zero session, you can go back and watch it, Dave kind of explains the, like, levels of knowledge and understanding of like where you should know what's going on in the world. This is the general lore stuff that's actually relevant to your character, and like here's the touchstones of that. And like I had a very long sidebar conversation with him about playing a Nexus 8 because again, that's a lore. I build lore based characters. It's my passion. I like lore, if that's not apparent already. And to be able to facilitate both someone who's like, I've seen the Ryan Gosling movie and nothing else. Don't hide.
No, I mean I haven't seen the Ryan Gosling movie actually.
I hadn't until I was cast in the Blade Runner.
It's all right.
It's just
I like parts of it.
Yeah.
The look on
Yeah,
Bridget's face.
you look pained.
Yeah.
But
I'm paid.
it's to say that like this goes back to kind of like just fandom gatekeeping in general, especially with IP related shows. It's like you're welcome to know as much or as little as you want. Just know that the narrative will not reward you for not knowing things that you're supposed to know.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to add to that was the part of your session 0 saying you're invited to look up this much stuff if you want. If you don't want to, I will fill in things as necessary. Yeah. And so just understand, if you don't want to do the homework, that's fine. But when you go to do a thing, I might say, oh, so like a Brotherhood of Steel guy would know not
This
to
thing.
touch that thing. And so you may want to adjust your action based on that, because here's some background you would have.
Yeah.
So
And there's a point too where like I ran an XCOM game. I'm thousands of hours into XCOM at this point. Weirdly not as a player.
yeah.
I could not describe to you how bad I am at turn-based strategic games
Interesting.
in that way. I know what I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot execute it to save my life, literally when it comes to the lives of my soldiers. But I have watched 2 1,000 hours of XCOM content probably at this
Yo.
point.
Wow.
I can't remember if I had at the time of our game, but I have completed Legendary Iron Man permadeath.
And so I had Jason at my table. I had people who had like kind of dabbled in XCOM, and so it was that range. And one of the things that I did that I thought was really interesting is rather than place it in between like XCOM 1 and 2, which was an option, is I placed it after XCOM 2 because the story I wanted to tell was a story of rebuilding and of learning to live with the changes that had been made to the world because of XCOM. So I kind of like gave the players a breakdown of what happened in War of the Chosen because it was necessary to know, like, here's what's just happened. But I jumped off of that to create our own place where they didn't feel constrained by the lore itself.
That's
And
big brain.
also to bring people into my own, like to bring people into my house. Because I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I set the story in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I brought in a lot of elements that were kind of like post-Katrina
Ooh.
influenced.
Yeah.
That it's like, here is what's going on in the city. And
Yeah.
here is how the city operates on its own. And also like how they are resistant to outsiders in a way.
Yeah.
And more than the challenge of aliens and bugs, they could have been more of a challenge, but my players all rolled really well.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Don't apologize, it was amazing.
What's with your dice?
So normally when I'm a player, I roll like ass.
In this
only in
game,
the
everybody
GMC.
was sixes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sixes across the board.
Yeah.
But what I was able to do because of that was lean more into the interpersonal relationships. And it was a really satisfying experience for me as a GM to say, like, I know these people. These are the people I grew up with. And when you're in community with these people, it is one thing. But if you are coming in and trying to impose what you think is correct on these people, they will resist you every step of the way. And also that, like, it's not like everybody is a saint who lives there already.
Right.
But, like, to have those factions, to have those ideas, and, like, be able to, like, merge that story with the story of this lore, like, this deep, deep lore. And we had people who, like, Jason had obviously played all the games and knew all the monsters and knew all the stuff, but, like, I was able to introduce new things to him because of the setting and because of when I was placing it within the lore itself. But then, like, there was stuff with, like, the wolf character that built, like, that bridged that. There was stuff that was coming from the lore specifically that influenced the story itself.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really fun. Like, it's something to say, like, when you're working in an established IP, that you don't have to work necessarily within the confines of the established IP.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was something I had a really good time with, and I felt was, like, really satisfying. Outside about the technical difficulties I had with my computer at the time, but
Yeah, and that gives you so much more freedom, and like we've talked about that a little bit, not so specifically with like Star Wars and stuff like that. Like, it's not fun if you're like, oh, okay, you're Luke's sidekick, you can't do anything that messes up the story.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that you were able to pull it away from like the official stuff in a very personal way
beautiful,
that really
yeah.
informs it. That's amazing.
yeah.
I think also. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, Jason's Demigod campaign that was Monsoon was actually set in South India. And it was a thing that Abri and I were able to inform a lot more when it came to introducing people like this. It's not lore so much as culture, but able to say, like, oh no, this is how the norms are in this culture that differ from what we have necessarily in the Western United States.
You brought up a point that I think is really neat, that I think more people, especially for a lore-rich setting, whether that is a home setting or an existing IP or a game that has existed forever. I was literally just ranting yesterday about World of Darkness, where if you can do that, like either removal from the major things or the timeline or the whatever. So like Kimmy was referencing Star Wars. I really like the High Republic series, which is entirely books and like novel based. And it's interesting because they literally said, yes, all that stuff exists, but what if we tell an entirely different point in time? Or like the Fallout show is one of the most timeline forward moments. So you can do that with your games and say like everything that came before or after is relevant, but it isn't imperative for you to know. You will learn the important things, because we were talking about this on Starscape too, of like how long ago was Earth? How important is that story to you? And you can negotiate that in every game, at every table.
I think it's important for when you're doing a game within an established IP or lore to not have to tiptoe through the glass museum where you're not allowed to do or change anything. I loved the XCOM game because we could do shit that I didn't know what would happen. Right? Or we could do Fallout with Samantha.
I'm doing a Star Wars game in hut space right now.
Right.
There's nothing in hut space in Star Wars.
And so the idea, you know, like certainly we love those properties because of the established stuff, but then also give the player some room to move and to make it their own and to own it. That's the fun thing of like, especially if it's a video game IP in particular. When you're playing the video game, you are on a rail to some extent, right? There are things you can do, things you can't do, people you can talk to, people you can't talk to. But at a tabletop, suddenly it's all unlocked, right? You could do anything.
Unlimited power.
And that's what you want to explore is honor the stuff that came before, but embrace and own the new stuff.
And this is where, like, tabletop and fan fiction, when you talk about established IP, like, inhabit the same space, is part of the reason why we love these established IPs is the ideas that they give us about what they could be. And the stories that they could tell. So it is not just about rehashing the same ground that has already been told, but forging a new path throughout, like, these worlds that you know and love, or that you are so excited to introduce somebody else to.
Also, like, as a GM, why are you telling the story if it isn't something interesting and new for you? Like, very flatly, like, sure, yeah, the players might be excited to play in this IP, but you are also a player. You are also part of this story driver. What about playing the entire plot of A New Hope is fun for you?
Right. Yep.
And so much, like, when I was a kid and I was, like, making up all this stuff on my own, because it's not that I didn't have friends, but I didn't have any friends who lived anywhere near me. So when I sat down with the World of Darkness, like with the vampire book, and I just made up my own shit to go along with it, this is what it was. It was like, oh, okay, well, these are the seeds that it's giving me. And what is the story I can tell with them? And that's what I feel like is the most important when you're introducing someone new to this world that you know so well, is to find those seeds that will spark that interest and for them to play off of. Is like, okay, maybe you don't connect specifically with the lore of XCOM itself. Like, you don't know, like, back to XCOM, how that worked, what everything, like, is going through and all the Easter eggs. But what you do know are the core tenets of the world. And those are the things that you need to impart to a new player. Like, to someone that you are bringing into this world with you, is like, when you boil everything else away, what is left? That's the stuff that you need to give a player.
And I want to circle back, linking that to what Jason mentioned for just a brief moment. Like, don't like give your players or yourself or whoever you're involved with, like, the information up at the top and like, okay, you have to know this, and then let them like twist in the wind during the actual game.
Yeah.
Right.
Help them.
Yeah, help them. That's like
Yeah.
a bullshit move if you're like, oh, gotcha, you would have done this.
Yeah.
Like, don't, like, Jason was great about that. I did, especially, like, the episode I did the most on was the one where Ray came in for that one episode.
Oh, yeah.
And he played
One of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, I love that one. I was like, and we're in this tower, and there's like all this like
So
deep
much lore.
lore, so much. I designed this giant tower of lore, and Ray, one of my best friends, amazing, like came and was like, "Help! You're wondering if this sounds great." He sits down, he's like, "Oh, you know a lot about Lord of the Rings, huh?" And he's
sure
like,
did.
"Yeah." He's like, "Well, I'm gonna be like a ranger." I'm like, "Oh, one of the Dunedain." Cool. So it was like, you can see me like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, okay, well, as a Dunedain, you'd know that this means this, and he was like, okay, well then, and then that he was able to, in the moment, knowing less about Lord of the Rings than anyone else at the table. Bless his
He
heart.
did such a good job.
He did so
though.
good.
That's awesome.
Like he was able to make like informed decisions as if he'd been one of Aragorn's like compatriots and like steeped in the lore of this long-lived people who like were of the the last of the Númenóreans and blah 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 and all these things and yeah and like don't just give it to them, like who cares, like scaffold if you're like using like here's what you would know, just like Jason did, just like don't gotcha them. That sucks.
Well,
No one wants a guy.
It goes to the like PBT logic of like don't hide important information behind roles.
Yeah.
Just tell them.
Yeah.
And like one of the biggest things that I think, especially for the like question that Brian asked, is like, especially if you're talking about not an IP, just take all IPs as to the same logic of like, if this is a homebrew, only you know.
Yeah.
Like you literally only you know, and as the game master, essentially, yeah, you might be working in an existing thing, a deep lore game system, a deep lore existing story, IP, whatever. Only you know the truth of the story you're telling, so you may as well facilitate that with your players.
Yeah. Let them ask
that's a-
questions, tell them things. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
No, I was done. That was it.
And it's one thing, like, especially when you talk about, like, things that you've been thinking about and ruminating on for a long time when you're talking about homebrew, that it's like, you know all of this
Yeah, you know it.
and want to share it.
It's so fun.
Like, it's so much fun to be like, oh, and this and this and this, and this is the kind of thing, like, this is the place your character is coming from, and then seeing the funky and weird ways
Oh,
your
yeah.
players go with that.
Well, and you'll be amazed. Your players, my players at least, and I know a lot of other tables have a very similar experience. My players egg me into lore drops. Because I've been building this world for like 6 years now. And they're like, okay, but tell us the thing. And I'm like, fine, I'll tell you the thing.
And I love it. It's like so much fun. And as someone who like fucking loves books so much, like being able to tie that in and being like, no, that these are the things I love about
Yeah.
this world that was built.
Yep.
Because one of my favorite things about reading books is like, and it has been since I was a kid, is like, if I was going to set a TTRPG, like if I was going to set a campaign in the Dragon Riders of Pern
Oh my God.
universe,
You got two players right here.
I could do this. It was literally my first like play by post.
Wow.
But back in when you had to log on, it was Prodigy and AOL.
Prodigy.
Yeah. The mushes.
yeah.
I'm old. What can I say? But like this kind of like. But the fun thing about that is to like lay it out for the players and be like, this is the world that you are in, and this is like the amazing things about this world that you know, and the amazing things about this world because of your unique experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a real, like, a thing that Kimmy and Kai, like, in the One Ring campaign really tied into.
For sure.
Is your experience as a character will drive this amount of knowledge. And that way you're not giving homework. You're, like, giving a gift.
It also goes back to like
Aw.
literally where we started as well, which is like trust your players and let your table culture dictate that. Because
Yeah.
like Kimmy gave me a lot of trust letting me play a lore nerd elf.
Right.
And like that was something that it's got to be something where you talk about it, you moderate it, you say like, these are the things you would know, me, you don't know this, but it's also about the culture where if like, I might know something, but I'd be like, hey, Kimmy, would Erland know this thing that might be contemporaneous and he lived in a dark hole that didn't know things were happening in the outside world. But that's a table culture conversation more than it is a lore conversation.
Right.
And be able to, even for players who are very knowledgeable, negotiate what that looks like, what that sounds like, and how that feels for the table, I think is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's really important because a lot of times people come to a table knowing everything. I've seen this, speaking specifically of homebrew, like there's been times where I've jumped in on a campaign that's been going for a long time, and some people know stuff that their characters wouldn't know, and they have trouble sometimes differentiating that.
Yep.
It's kind of like the opposite problem of imparting knowledge to your players of how do you get players to stop being like know-it-alls all the time.
Right.
And it's not like malicious metagaming in any way. It's just sometimes hard to like differentiate between I know this and my character probably wouldn't know this. And you did a great job of kind of balancing that.
I like
so
not
well.
knowing things. Again, I love a failure.
Yes.
There's a glimmer in that particular D&D player's eye where you just start describing a creature and you see them mentally go through the Rolodex of the monster manual.
I reflavor every monster I put at my table because I play with 2 GMs who
Yeah.
have been GMing for much longer than I've been playing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I specifically mentioned like, hey, I restat some of the monsters. Like, yeah, it's a rust monster,
But you don't know what
this
it's gonna
one's
do.
weird,
Yeah.
right? Like, just so you know ahead of time.
Yeah.
If that's what's happening, you might not know everything about it. Also, your character wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's also fun for them
Yes. Well,
A surprise.
I mean, sometimes
if they're on board.
I've had
Yeah.
some players be frustrated
Yeah.
by that, but
It's
yeah.
Also,
powder-coated monster.
Yep.
That's a very
Tease.
niche.
I can
Sorry.
hear-
It's funny. Okay. Sorry.
sometimes you can just say no if you're
It's true.
the one does not exist in this universe.
Right.
Yes.
No, but it did though. Should we do another mail?
Sure.
Mailbag?
Shall we read the
Mailbag.
long one?
Mailbag number
Um,
2.
Do you want to do it or shall I? Or do you want to split
Well,
it?
how about I launch and then I'll pass the baton.
Okay.
Okay.
When your mouth gets tired.
Well,
This is why I took the short one.
dear Kimmy and whoever is hosting this week, hello from the Garden State of New Jersey. I shouldn't do that. The Northwest portion is very much the Garden State. Trust me, I do.
I believe you.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have requested emails and said they didn't have to be questions. While most of the people I know are using Discord, I figured this might be a little longer, so I wanted to do it the old-fashioned way and actually email you.
Thank you.
The most recent episode I listened to had an hour and 13-minute conversation about politics, and what stuck with me was the comment that any social interaction is politics. This made me think of a conflict generator I picked up from who knows where. Heck, it could have been a very old episode of Happy Jacks for all I know.
Maybe.
And how much I enjoy using it. Thus, I wanted to share it with you. It's a little thing to get the creative juices flowing.
All right.
Insert Joker voice. So, here we go. Basically, take whatever number of NPC major players or townspeople or classmates or really any grouping of people that have different goals. As an example, we're going to use Orc number 1 and Orc number 2 just to keep it simple. Keep in mind, you could do this with a dozen characters easily enough. Next, give each character a goal they are trying to attain. This can be short-term or long-term, depending on the scope of their existence in the campaign world. If they are only going to be in a session or two, you can get away with shorter-term goals. For a group of beings covering the entire campaign, long-term goals are probably best. In our example, Orc number 1 wants to eat pie. Relatable. Orc number 2 wants to protect a pie. By the way, the orc and pie scenario has existed for decades and has been written about in Dragon Magazine back in the day.
I knew that did sound familiar.
Yeah. As soon as we got to the pie part, I was like, all right, I know what we're talking about. The next thing you do is roll a 10-sided die to see how close they are to accomplishing their goal.
Oh.
A 10 means they're doing a great job or are on the cusp of achieving their goal. A roll of 1 means they're just beginning the process and are having an incredibly difficult time of it. For example, Orc number 1 got a 5, so he can probably smell the pie and has a general idea of where the pie is, but may not know another Orc is defending it. Orc number 2 roll a 4, so he's having a slightly harder time of things. He probably has to watch the pie by himself, so he takes risks when he sleeps that the pie will be stolen.
I should have had dinner before.
Oh no, I want
I like
pie.
pie.
now.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Next, you draw an arrow from each being to the other beings involved in this.
Oh, on paper. I was like,
I was making being a verb. There was a lot of versions of how that sentence went.
we were
was
talking about
with you on
archery
that one.
before the
Yeah,
show.
I love an
yeah.
archery. Anyways, with only 2 people, you need to draw. You need only. I can read. You only need to draw 2 arrows. One from orc number 1 to orc number 2, and another from orc number 2 to orc number 1. Now, on those lines, you roll a 10-sided
Cider, I think.
10 side and write that number next to an arrow.
Well,
You're making like a character map.
But yeah, we're just having a little bit of a text struggle.
Yeah.
here, like, legitimately.
Yeah, I'm reading words. Anyways, repeat for each arrow. This is how favorably each being views the other. Very important. Love a relationship map.
I was about to say we're looking at it like a vampire.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah, or masks influence.
Yep. In our example, I rolled an 8 for orc number 1's attitude towards orc number 2, and orc number 2 rolled a 2 for his attitude towards orc number 1. Orc number 1 really respects orc number 2, while orc number 2 would probably kill orc number 1 without thinking about it.
Human shield or orc shield, I guess
Orc
in
shield.
this case.
Finally, since this is just a creativity jogging exercise, change numbers as you see fit. In this example, I am going to raise orc number 2's protect the pie goal to about a 7, which for me means that he will have traps and alarm bells set up so he can sleep peacefully while guarding the pie. Good for him.
I thought of a bad joke I have to say. So he's not a meat shield. He's a pie shield.
Maybe it's a meat pie, then he is a meat shield.
Oh, it's a meat pie shield. This
Yeah.
is the best of both worlds.
Yep.
Oh,
Love a
meat
meat
pie,
pie.
is so
Everybody
good.
Yeah,
wins.
I'm hungry too.
Pasties.
Now that you have the situation, you apply PCs to it. Please note, I did not suggest who is the antagonist in this situation, so the GM could leave it up to the PCs or just pick one to suit the fiction. Orc number 1 really wants the pie, but we'll find out that the orc guarding it is someone he really doesn't want to harm. Does he try to get help circumventing the traps while orc number 2 sleeps? The PC help? Does he ask the PCs to intervene on his behalf, maybe discussing with orc number 2 why he should give up some pie? Or how about orc number 2? Does he convince the PCs to kill orc number 1? Perhaps he uses the respect orc number 1 has for him to get orc number 1 to attack the PCs, hoping that orc number 1 will die. It sets up a variety of things to happen.
It all comes back to capitalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All in all, it doesn't beat pure creativity, but when you're trying to figure something out, sometimes it isn't bad to have a little exercise to get the creative juices flowing. I hope you enjoyed the exercise. As always, stay happy, stay tipsy, and stay diverse. Mugs held high, Eric from New Jersey.
Cheers.
Huzzah.
Cheers.
Although I'm not sure what pure creativity means. I do shit like this all the time when I'm like, ooh, how's this gonna work? And like, mind map out a thought and...
I'm a megamaniacal genius and just off the dome want people to fight.
Just brilliant ideas just flowing
Yeah.
constantly. Like a fire hose.
I build my NPCs, especially in conflict, like I build my PCs. I love for them to fail, and I like to make them messy.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will always make these rolls, if I were to do something like this, worse.
Yeah.
Every time without failure.
Yeah. This is very nice and organized. I am much more like throw mess against a wall and see what colors mix.
Like, ooh!
Yeah, it's like there's this PC who does this, and this PC who's also a hot mess, and this PC who's a hot mess. Oh look, they're draining together. Their hot messes are conflicting.
Yeah.
I love this.
And that's kind of, I feel like how I'm like, you know what? This PC really cares about this, but also they come from like this, and so they're having like some kind of inner war within themselves, and
Yep.
depending on what the PCs do, they can go one way, they can go this way, and I kind of like, when I was setting up my my City of Mist campaign,
Mhm.
for 12-sided stories, I did like a whole like Scrivener flowchart
Oh,
kind
yeah.
Oh man.
of like, these are the different factions.
Yeah.
This is what the faction leader cares about, and here are a set of NPCs that they could meet,
Mhm.
and this is what each of those like NPCs actually cares about, and how much the faction has on them.
Mhm.
This is how screwed you are, actually.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that, like, it was a little bit of choose your own adventure situation, that it was like, okay, well, if you go this way, this is how they'll react. And like, because of course, like, out of all of us, as usual, I am the least experienced GM at the table. I need some kind of like, and so this makes sense to me, but at the same time, I feel like what I love to do as a GM is, rather than roll the dice to see where they're at or whatever, is just to think to myself, like, once again, being a book nerd, it's like, what's the most interesting thing to come across as part of this scene?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all GMing is really, in my opinion anyways, is set piece building.
Yeah.
And so this is a very interesting and like quick tool for set piece building.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that, like, basically I feel like the difference is this is like a diagram of how to build a stage, and we're talking like, what if we just use spray foam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very
Right.
different techniques. They both make great set pieces.
Yes.
And especially like if I were gonna be doing like a out of pocket, sit down at a game at a con and needed to create a conflict in like 5 seconds, I might use a tool just like this, just to be like, I don't have anything off the dome. I'm really tired. I haven't slept enough. I'm a little hungover. Let me just roll some dice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just gonna. I think this came up somewhat recently. I am generally known as a low to no prep GM, and the conversation revealed that that's not technically true. I have 30 years of prep.
Yeah.
Yes.
35.
There's a book
years.
right there that says that you're wrong.
Yeah, 35 years of prep. I've been doing it so long. There's a bunch of stuff I already did.
Yeah.
You know, that when a new GM comes to the table and they're like, oh my God, I have to do all this stuff. Like, that's normal. I did that when I was 12. I got a head start on you.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not like a better GM or whatever. And I had a really interesting exercise recently. I hope you don't mind me pulling the curtain back, Pooja, but like, I had to hand the reins over on Pinnacles to Pooja for a couple episodes because I wanted to, and I knew they would just like completely, I would say destroy it, like in the best way possible, like run with it. I've been trying to get Pooja in the GM seat for years because I knew how good Pooja would be at it. But I had to then translate all the ideas in my mind to something Pooja could use to keep the flow of the story going forward and be able to
What
tie
Jason
things
isn't
together.
telling you is also that he gave me this idea while I was at work on like Friday.
Oh,
For
Yeah.
a Sunday
we
game.
played
It was
on
like
Sunday.
48 hours notice. Yeah.
Oof.
And I was like, I'll do this for you, but
So-
you will do all the prep for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our last email about like dumping a bunch of lore on someone very
Okay. Well, it was a game that Pooja had been in
I know,
for
yeah.
20 episodes.
Yeah,
Then also,
25 episodes.
the world I was stepping into GM was cast-offs, so I already knew all of
Yeah.
them.
I know.
So lore-wise, yeah. But I had some ideas of what went wrong, how they were going to solve it, and then just because of, I think, because a player was absent or something, like we were changing things up a little bit, and then I thought, oh, it'd be fun in this alternate universe if the person who played in that universe takes over GMing, and then I get to play this NPC for a minute,
Yeah.
and like, but
COVID
it.
was what happened.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I had to play remote, I think, for the first episode. And, but it revealed to me how much prep I actually do and just don't write down. And it made me think about, you know, like this exercise, this is not a lack of pure creativity. This is what I'm trying to get back to of like, this is, you're doing yourself dirty on that. Like,
well, I think like not creativity. I think they just meant like improv.
yeah.
Like, and
Sure.
I don't think they mean that it's not creative to come up with this.
Yeah.
It's just like you don't necessarily need to pull it from your butt.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah. I just want new GMs to give themselves more credit.
Well,
Yes.
and this goes back. I recently, because I've been so busy, I decided to pick up another game not long ago. I mentioned
why
my
not?
Star Wars game.
Because you're not busy.
But I picked Star Wars not because I love Star Wars. I do love Star Wars,
You do.
but that's not why I picked it. I picked it because I told myself this is going to be a low prep game.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, I've been prepping for this game since I was born. Star
Yes.
Wars was one of the
Yeah.
very first movies I ever watched. And so even though I limit myself to about 6 hours of prep for that game per session, 6 hours,
Mm-hmm.
I promise. That doesn't include the fact that I also have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of the lore of Star Wars.
Right.
And if I don't have it, the internet has it.
Yes.
And so that is my GM prep crunched down into a tiny ball. But in the exact same thought, that is exactly what this system essentially is gifting you, is like, hey, my strength as a storyteller is making people make messy choices and messy interpersonal chaos and lore.
Yeah.
Other people might not have those strengths. Literally, both of the mailbag questions today are essentially what I do as a GM, storyteller, whatever. And so, but other people don't have that. And for this is like, hey, you have two factions, or you have these kinds of people in this town. Go whole ham. And this is permission structures that are created in games like Vampire that are like, let's make a messy interpersonal web. If you ever want to look at a messy interpersonal web example, go look at charts of the Greek gods and how they relate to each other.
Yeah.
Or
And
how they are related to each other.
It's a family wreath. It's fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
fine.
It's fine.
Um,
You could also look at like the reincarnations of the Hindu gods.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
messy.
I do, after I make stuff up, pull it out of my butt during a game session, I do draw stuff like this because that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the reasons I love one shots because I don't have to remember things for more than like an hour.
Yep.
But especially for the One Ring, like I took more notes for that game than I have, I think, any other game because I wanted to make sure whatever we did like was consistent. It's really important, even if we were tweaking the lore or whatever, like it was consistent no matter what happened.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, in my notebook, there's a lot of weird little drawings with people's names and arrows and stuff, like very similar to the like what you were describing in the email, just because that's how my brain works to remember things. And I could very quickly flip back to that page and be like, oh, yes, they hate each other and those two love each other. Great. Okay. And then flip back to whatever page I need names on. So drawings and character maps like that are incredibly helpful. And I love the idea of rolling a die to like the urgency or how far along they are. Or that's a very cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the idea that like obviously the example you gave us was on the absolute simplest
Mhm.
level of that. But like when you
Pie.
get into
Pie's so good.
But when you get into 7 or 8 different factions or NPCs or whatever it is, it's that easy little like, oh, okay. On a scale of 1 to 10,
Mhm.
or on a triangle of like marry, fuck, kill.
Yes.
Mhm.
A good character generation question for
Yeah.
the record.
And
Yeah.
it really is like for NPCs, it's just like, okay, what are their interpersonal relationships?
Yeah.
It's a really fast and easy way to be like, okay, this person wants to, okay, and this person is, and that person, oh, that person doesn't give a fuck about anybody.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I find that kind of stuff a lot of fun, and it's like those little things that spark a creative flow for you, where
Mhm.
it's like, okay, the dice has a 2.
Mhm.
Why don't I like it?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. There are more like various wordings of marry, fuck, kill like embedded in Decima.
Yes,
Yes,
definitely.
yes, there really are.
Nice, elegantly worded questions that are
Yeah.
essentially, why would you kill this person?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, why do you hate them?
Why? Okay. Thank you for joining us for season 33, episode 20 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Craig Campbell. Him at DriveThruRPG when you search for Nerdburger games. And we talked about Capers this week, which is a super powered, like 20s game. You heard my amazing accent. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. And we haven't said it in a while, but I want to say, like, we don't take sponsorships. We don't do any of this stuff. Like, we don't charge ad revenue. We don't have indie designers pay us money. Like, we do none of that stuff. We just do whatever games we want and say whatever we want about whatever games we want to. And then our Patreons keep the lights on, keep the mini fridge full, as we like to say. So thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Yes. My name is Kimmy.
I'm Pooja.
Okay.
I'm Jason.
Please join us at the next Strategicon at GameX, May 24th through the 27th. Jason will be doing a signing. It'll be very exciting for Demigods.
Jason.
Yay! So good. And joining us for our 2 new APs that are happening right now on Mondays and Thursday nights. So those are both spinning up. And we are going to leave you with a song tonight. We're going to leave you with a song called John Barleycorn Must Die, which is a traditional song by Stu Venable about making beer. And you can find it at netbusker.net. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
There were 3 kings came from the north so high. They all did make a solemn vow John Barleycorn should die with a folly diddle right folly day. They plowed him in, they harrowed him in with clods all o'er his head. And these 3 kings they swore and vowed John Barleycorn was dead with the folly diddle right folly day. There he lay sleeping in the ground till rain from heaven did fall. Then Barleycorn sprung up his head and so amazed them all with the folly diddle right folly day. There he remained till midsummer and looked both pale and wan. Then Barleycorn he got a beard and he became a man with me folly diddle right folly day. Then they sent men with scythes so sharp to cut him off at need. And then poor little Barleycorn they served him barbarously with me folly diddle right folly day. Then they sent men with pitchforks strong to pierce him through the heart. And like a dreadful tragedy, they bound him to a cart with me folly diddle right folly day. They hired men with crabtree sticks and whipped him skin from bone. The miller served him worse than that. They ground him twixt 2 stones with me folly diddle right folly day. Oh, Barley